Welcome back to Startup Health Now, the podcast where we celebrate the entrepreneurs and innovators who are transforming health. I'm your host, Logan Plaster. Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm good. Tsunami warning here in the Bay Area, internet down. Being a founder, being an entrepreneur, being an innovator, it's just ongoing ups and downs and flows and cycles, but it's always fun and always interesting. But I'm good. I'm happy to be talking to you.
I've got a special interview for you today, a slight departure from our typical founder interview from the Startup Health community. I wanted to dial up Unity Stoakes, my boss and the co-founder of Startup Health, to have a candid conversation about the importance of brand and storytelling for every founder and startup of every organization.
A brand has a lot of opportunity if you lean into it. And it becomes the foundation of how you attract your team, how you attract your partners, how you attract your first customers, how you attract your investors, and all the different things you need to do to grow an organization.
In our conversation, we go back to the beginning of Startup Health, even before, and talk through Unity's lessons learned, establishing a brand that has become synonymous globally with health innovation. Plus, we'll outline together our new pro membership program and explain how we are using our media platform to help later stage founders scale their businesses. Let's get right into it. So the goal here is twofold. We want to talk about Startup Health's strategy around brand and story because it's been so pivotal. It's been really a leg of the stool from the very beginning. Talk about some of the stuff that you architected from the beginning and kind of what we've done over the last 11 or so years, 13 years. And then also talk about this new way we've opened that up for folks through our new pro membership. So I want to talk through that sort of evolution. And to do that, I really want to start by going way back. You introduced me to the Wayback Machine. I want to take the Wayback Machine. I want to go way back because what was it, 2011? Would you say the official start of Startup Health? Is that fair?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so 2011, Startup Health is beginning, and you really architected a beautiful brand from day one, and you had a unique perspective on using media from day one, video, podcast, before it was as big as it is now. So I want to start by just asking you kind of what were some of your influences back in 2011 when you were thinking about the kind of brand you wanted to create?
Yeah, and I would say it even goes back before 2011 in terms of influences, but I brought all those influences forward to 2011 with Steve and what we're trying to do with Startup Health, which is build a brand. A brand is something that stands for something. It's something that's meant to really represent a feeling, a vibe, a message, a vision, in the best sense of that concept. And that's what Startup Health always was about. So if you even go to the name Startup Health, um, it
Naming
kind
is
of
tough. Naming is hard.
naming's hard, and in two words, it kind of tells the whole story, or three words, I guess, if you want to count it as three syllables. But um, it's a brand has a lot of opportunity if you lean into it, and it becomes the foundation of how you attract your team, how you attract your partners, how you attract your first customers, how you attract your investors, and all the different things you need to do to grow an organization or grow a business. So, starting with a brand, it's really one of the most fundamental things I think any organization needs to do in order to get started.
Yeah.
And really, it's something that builds over time.
You know, I was looking back over in preparation for this call, I was looking back over some of the earliest videos on our YouTube channel, which goes back quite a ways. And before my time, you created a video about the genesis of the logo. And it's very sort of lovingly created, like, here was the time and thought that went into this logo. And now we have, AI will create 100 logos for you in 10 seconds. It's not the same sort of loving process. And I was just curious what your thought process was at the time in wanting to be that deliberate.
Well, there's a little backstory there because there's a logo before our logo now, and it drove me crazy. As Steve will tell you, we had this logo that we created. Actually, our very first fellow helped us create this logo on 99 Designs, I think.
Okay.
And there wasn't much thought or time put into the creation of that on our part. I'm sure the artist was fantastic. We just didn't give very good direction. And it had like 15 different elements going on. And I was so frustrated by this logo that I was driven to create a new logo with a really great artist named Sasha Mombarts. But um, yeah, so I think, as we were just talking about brand, and we're going to talk about the building blocks. If you look at the Startup Health logo today, it's one of those building blocks of our brand. So there's the word Startup Health, and then there's the logo and identity. And there's a bunch of building blocks in there. They go together. It's about we're trying to build something here. We're trying to build a community, build a movement around health moonshots. And that's really what the foundation was meant to be, these cornerstones, if you will, of what was to come. And that was going back, we're going back to 2011, I guess, but early days of before we even had developed a brand, we were starting with those foundational pieces.
And then you were very early in terms of creating consistent video content. I know you'd go to conferences and you would shoot a bunch of interviews in the early days. And I recall something that I thought was very innovative was that you actually brought on, like even when you were a small company, you had somebody on the team doing video work on staff. Most people might outsource that or do one or two things a year, but you prioritized it. What was it that made you decide to prioritize storytelling on like a weekly basis in those early days?
Yeah, there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first is that word and doubling down on that word you just used, storytelling. There's narrative storytelling is one of the most powerful forms of communication there is. It goes back to the beginning of humanity, really, and people remember stories. They remember great stories. And so the art of storytelling, I think, is essential to developing meaning behind your organization. Again, for the purpose of inspiring great team members and collaborators and partners and customers and investors, right? So it was important to us to use narrative storytelling to help explain what we were trying to do with Startup Health. And there's the second part of that you mentioned, which is really important, which is an ongoing, I like to say a drumbeat, an ongoing narrative that just never ends, a consistency and a rhythm to the storytelling. So I think one of the most important things we ever did was start a weekly newsletter that has been published since the genesis of Startup Health.
Yeah.
Every week, at least once a week, same day, like clockwork, started
Mhm.
on Wednesdays, still happens on Wednesdays. And now we've added several other days, but there's this drumbeat, this ongoing narrative, stories of progress around these health moonshots. And that's the story we're trying to tell. And we can get into that later. But um, you know, narrative storytelling and consistency in an ongoing journey, if you will, is really important.
Now, to connect your story with founders that might be listening or in our portfolio, in order to be innovative in storytelling and communications and media, you have to experiment. You got to try stuff. Sometimes that means, nowadays that might be someone just trying out TikTok for a few months and saying, is this for me? And I wonder if over the years, did you do a lot of experimentation? And in particular, was there anything that you tried that ended up being a bit of a miss? You're like, oh, let's get on. this platform that ends up not panning out. We're going to be huge on SoundCloud or whatever it is. What were some of those experiments you did?
We did SoundCloud. I used to publish on SoundCloud and Blurb and everything. We believe in one of the beauties of stories is you can translate them across media. I believe in multi-channel storytelling, right? So if you have a really good narrative, a really good story, you just repackage that same narrative, that same story, but in different ways. So we're doing a podcast conversation now, but we're also recording it. It can be turned into social bits. It can be turned into narrative blog posts. It can be turned into little tweets. It can be turned into long form content across different types of channels, including our print magazine, right? So I think really in the modern era, it's about being where people are, and people are everywhere. So you got to really think about your communication strategy or your storytelling strategy within a multi-channel system at this point.
Now I'm going to double down because you mentioned SoundCloud and Blurb, and people today will just see the channels that we use that are successful and not realize that we had to do a lot of that experimentation to get there. So I do want to hear like other areas things you tried. You got to try a bunch of things to know what's going to stick.
I mean, everything. It's so interesting. We've tried. It seems like we've tried everything. It's right? In fact, the precursor to Startup Health was our organization called Organized Wisdom, and we created, really one of the first, if not the first, digital doctor's offices. We were doing user-generated content. We were going into pharma and selling pharma-friendly social media. This was before Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We were talking about user-generated content, right?
Mm,
So the concept of blogging was barely even a word. If it was a word, maybe there was blogger.com at that point. So,
right.
um, I think you're hitting on or scratching on a couple of important themes. One is the concept of experimentation. Um, and I think it's for any type of organization that's trying to innovate, it's important to test. Important to experiment. Important to make sure you're giving new things a try. Because the second point I'd like to kind of scratch on is um, in the modern era, it's like streaming innovation, right? It's not static. Everything's very dynamic.
Yeah.
There was 6degrees.com, then there was MySpace, then there was Friendster, then there's Facebook, then there's Instagram, then there's TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just about flowing with the different channels, and some will work, some won't. I mean, to me, it's so fascinating to see what's going on with podcasting today because we were back there with Adam Curry at the very beginning when it was just called podcasting.
Yeah.
Going back 20, 25 years.
Back when it actually was a reference to an iPod.
Even before that, it was just a recording. It was basically, Adam Curry from MTV. I think he was maybe the first podcaster, if you will. But you would buy these kits online that came with a microphone and came with this recording devices. And then it was a really complicated process to get those things recorded and then published.
Yeah.
And I was doing a lot of stuff then. It was really cool because before all of the free classes and Coursera's and Coursera X or YouTube or Khan Academy, you could go online and download on Napster or these other places college lectures,
Yeah.
like from Harvard or Yale or Duke or
Hmm.
Stanford. And literally, I would go download entire classes, and it was like getting, Ivy League educations from all of the, any class I wanted to take. Oh, I want to take astronomy or whatever. And I always thought about, hey, how could this be leveraged? How could this new format be leveraged in the business world, right? So, and I think that's where we are today. You see it with these amazing podcasts that are going on. There's too many to even listen
Yeah.
to. They're so great.
Yeah, I think one of the themes I hear you saying is the need to be able to flow with the innovation as the media changes, keeping your story central. If you're maybe a younger company and you sort of think about your storytelling as only Instagram versus TikTok, you're gonna say, should I do this or should I do that? And you're gonna be kind of obsessed with the algorithm and kind of the format versus saying, no, my story is gonna carry through 10, 15 different types of media, and I need to keep that central. And the form's gonna change. It's gonna look like this today, it's gonna look like that tomorrow, and to experiment. I have a lot of folks who come to our office hours and ask about, social media platforms. And what has been huge has been for me to do more experimentation so that then I can share that with them and say, like, look, until you try it, you're really not going to know how it's going to work for you, how the algorithm is going to respond. You may find fascinating results to your experiments, but you got to get out there and you got to give it a shot.
Yeah, and I think there's some fundamental things that are universal and translate across media and across time and across, generations. First of all, we started with narrative storytelling. A good story is a good story, Um, I think standing for something, being authentic, and that's what a great brand represents, right? What does this mean? What does it represent? What's the vision? I think being able to clearly communicate your why, your purpose, the Simon Sinek, what's your why? That's a universal concept. Um, the concept we just talked about of repetition, telling, your story over and over and over in a way that people will eventually, it may resonate with them. So these are universal things. I think any health transformer, anyone trying to break through and achieve a health moonshot, if we could just scratch on that for a second, because the concept of a health moonshot is really meant to be a narrative frame. It's, to
Yeah,
simply outline a big, bold mission that can inspire and attract a generation of people, innovators, funders, etc., behind that mission.
yeah,
Um, the health transformers, we use that language very purposefully because it's meant to represent that these entrepreneurs, these innovators are the superheroes of our time. They're
yeah.
working on some of the most important challenges of our time. Um,
What I love about what we do is that in the world of marketing and branding, you try to do that kind of storytelling for every brand. You try to make everything mean the world. And yet, these companies really are trying to change the world. They really are trying to heal millions of people. They're trying to make healthcare available for millions of people. And so to tap into those storytelling techniques of making somebody a hero and the hero's journey for a company that actually is heroic is really exciting. It's an interesting part of the job.
it is, and because it's hard. It's being an entrepreneur in any industry is challenging. It's grueling. In fact, it's like I think of the mythology stories of, you're climbing up the mountain and you're pushing a boulder up the mountain and it rolls back down over you. It's like every day, peaks and valleys within one day. Um, Learning how to be told no all day long is really quite challenging.
Yeah.
And that's the hero's journey you mentioned that these entrepreneurs are going on. Um, but I think there's there's another aspect of the storytelling or brand building that I think plays right into this is when when you have a North Star, when you kind of know where you're trying to get to on your journey, it makes it easier for that struggle or to break through those walls and break past those struggles and wake up rejuvenated every day. And when you're a health transformer or in a category like health, and there's so much purpose and so much meaning and passion behind what you're doing, um, it it just makes it a little easier to kind of break through and pick yourself up and keep going. So that's one aspect of it. And then, of course, when you can align with others that are on that same journey with you,
Yeah.
and it's all the better. And that's what community's about. And communities also form when there's alignment, when there's mission alignment around the same narrative or the same goal, the same mission. And that's where I think it all ties together, where community marries with a message and it starts to create something that's really, really quite powerful
Yeah.
and impactful.
So we've talked about the origins, sort of the architecture of Startup Health as a storytelling company, and now having been consistent with that over 14 years, let's come to the present and kind of talk about how we work with founders. I think it's important to mention that now, after all of that consistent storytelling, now we're at a place that's really enviable for any company in healthcare. More than 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, reaching hundreds of thousands of people on a weekly basis, subscribers, followers across all these different channels. These three different email newsletters that have been incredibly successful, used to tell the stories of progress from the more than 500 companies that we've supported over the years. Really, what's so fascinating about that to me is this idea of owning your own media channels and not just posting something out and hoping that, the blog gods pick it up and you get a little bit of love that day, but actually saying, no, this story deserves to be told. So I'm going to curate the audience myself, and we're going to make sure they hear this story. And so, we've gotten to an interesting place now where you've said this before. We've created our own printing press across all these channels, our own channels, so that we can tell these good stories on a daily basis and not rely on somebody else to pick it up, which I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think every great founder should do this, really. I think there's a couple of aspects to what this means. There Everyone has the opportunity to build their own printing press today. Um, and it's one thing to have a great product. It's one thing to have great science. And great technology. It's also very important to make sure the world, your customers, your partners, your investors, uh, people know about it, right? And so building your own printing press, making sure you're using communication, um, is really, really one of the most important things in terms of building value, and ultimately making you successful in whatever your mission is. Look at all the great brands. look at, from Amazon to Apple, they all do this incredibly well, and they've done it from essentially day one. They
Yeah.
prioritized it from the beginning. And I think another really important aspect of this is and this is what we really care deeply about in terms of all of the health transformers in startup health and our health moonshot communities is it's one thing to get introductions, and be introduced and try to go out there selling something or raising capital. But really, there's a whole way to flip the script here, which is to try to transform what you're doing and you and your organization into becoming a
Mm,
magnet that
yeah.
attracts the most inspiring talent, the most inspiring people, the best customers, the best investors. Like, and if you can package what you're doing because you have an authentic purpose, you have an extraordinary product, and you now shape a really good brand and a really good narrative, then you over time can become a magnet that becomes stronger and stronger and stronger, where it's less about selling and it's more about attracting all those great networks and customers and resources that will help you be successful along the way. That's what we hope to do. I
Yeah.
think that's what you do so well with Startup Health Media and the various ways of that drumbeat you're doing every day, every week of telling these stories of progress about these amazing solutions coming from these health transformers and the progress being made on these health moonshots.
Well, I think that's a great segue, and I want to make sure we finish with explaining how we're specifically leveraging this for founders through our new pro membership. So this is a new program, that we rolled out this year in 2024, and takes all of the learnings that we've had for the last 14 years, which in the past was, storytelling about our brand and about our portfolio, and is now making that available for these founders who you said really can and need to own their own printing press, need to tell their own story on a consistent basis. And we have figured out a way to come alongside them in this program and help them do that. Not only do some of it for them through our channels, and then also give them the tools to do it themselves through different coaching sessions. What are you most excited about the pro membership and kind of how it can help folks in this community accelerate growth?
Well, the question that I kept asking myself, and I think we all worked really hard on answering, was what would it look like if we just made it easier and more efficient, more effective, more affordable for these amazing early stage founders to not have to go hire a $15,000 a month PR firm or marketing agency to essentially hope that someone learns about what they're doing. Um, there's been so much innovation over the past 20 years in terms of like paid marketing
Hmm.
and and paid SEO, and oh, you can get into Google AdWords, and it's been very helpful. It's been very efficient and effective for a whole long tail generation of entrepreneurs and innovators who are now able to target and break through and very efficiently advertise.
Hmm.
And I think the lens that we came on is there a way to really make it very effective and efficient for the upstarts, the innovators, the health transformers, the builders, the makers, the creators, in a way that gets their very important stories out there to the world.
Hmm.
In the old school way, I was also very inspired by Wired magazine because back before Wired, there was a lot of like industry trade magazines, these scientific industry trades around technology. They were meant for industry leaders, technologists to read. And then Wired magazine comes out. and turns these really complicated science and technology and innovation stories and makes them compelling and interesting and novel and tells those stories in a way that opened up the world of technology to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I want, well, going back to the beginning of Startup Hell, 2011, that's what I was like, and we wanted to do that for this amazing health moonshots, the science, the technology, the innovation going on to cure diabetes,
Yeah.
cure Alzheimer's, cure cancer, um, increase healthy lifespan by dozens or 50 years, to lean into women's health and maternal health. All these, there's so much innovation going on, but it's been trapped in science journals and trade industry
Yeah.
magazines, industry conferences. Well, the whole concept of the moonshot and the moon landing was, hey, let's take space and open it up to the whole world. Let's bring this really amazing concept and make it interesting and compelling to everyone. And everyone, health is universal. It impacts all of us. So I'm getting off on a little rant here, but I believe so deeply that through these stories of progress, these stories about these health transformers and the solutions they're created, the more people know about them, that they're accessible and available to them, the progress being made, the more customers we can attract to them, the more investors and capital we can attract to them, um, the the more likely will be to succeed, and the more impact we can make in terms of helping more people with the best solutions getting out there to the world.
That's great. We only have a couple minutes, but I want to finish with a very clear call to action because we really do want promising founders, heads of great health tech companies to come to startuphealth.com to apply to join a health moonshot. So let's just talk about some of the logistics there. We have a deadline. Here it is, December 2024. We've got a deadline for the end of the year that's very important because it unlocks some special media opportunities at places like CES and JPM in San Francisco. And so all the details you can get in our weekly emails, and applying is extremely easy. But I want folks to join because when I talk to folks on office hours and through master classes, there is this gap that you've been describing. There's this gap in storytelling, in really understanding how to make your story resonate. I believe it's a huge unlock. I think we can help people do it, even in a relatively short amount of time, help them to accelerate growth. It's understandable that their focus has been on the product and on trying to get to market. And oftentimes people aren't really thinking about how they come across, how they share their story. And I do think we can help them with that. So any last words from you as to why folks should think about joining?
I mean, if you're an extraordinary entrepreneur, innovator, founder, passionately working on a your own health moonshot mission, we want to meet you. We want to support you. We want to help tell your story. We want you to become a magnet for attracting more customers and capital. And um, I think we've over the past 14 years or so, we've created a really amazing deep network. Um, and it only gets stronger. We're stronger together. We're stronger with every moonshot community we build. So my message would be, this is really for all stages of startups, including later stage companies. In fact, I would say if you're an organization that's really ready to scale, that really wants to raise that next round, that's really working hard to meet more customers, then this should be one of the pillars of your strategy
Yeah.
for 2025 and beyond, because it's not the only one. It's just one of the strategies and tactics you should be employing. And there's just tremendous opportunity and power when we do it together as strong, we like to say, global armies of mission aligned founders working together in the same category, because that creates a fusion. It creates an energy. So you and we're going to be at CES. We're going to be, telling the stories at CES and JP Morgan and throughout next year. But we want to meet you. You guys are the heroes. Uh, we're here to support you. We're your cheerleader. We're your wing person. And we want to do it together. That would be my thought.
All right. Sounds good. Unity, thanks for taking time with me today. And I hope to hear from folks who hear this.
Well, thank you, Logan. And for anyone that hasn't seen, you talked about experimenting earlier, and I love your new Instagram shorts you're doing, these walk and talk interviews you've done. You keep testing new things, you keep figuring out how to tell stories in different ways. And I'm going to pay a huge compliment because every week my mom calls and she's like, I love what this company's doing. And my mom's not from healthcare or
Yeah.
the industry, but she's deeply inspired every week by reading these stories. And that's
Love
how
it.
I know you're hitting the mark on these things, is when I get a call from mom.
I love it. I'm gonna keep her in my mind as my avatar. I'm writing for her.
All right,
All
cool.
right. Good to see you.
Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. We'll be back again with another episode next week.